So, we're tackling the big topic of homelessness. Homelessness being a topic that I've wanted to talk about for a while now. Um, Especially since I would say worldwide, homeless people are dehumanized, treated as basically barely people, marginalized, and I don't think many people talk about their plight. And this is a little bit of a weird paradox. The fact that most people pretend or want to believe that basically homeless people don't exist. Like it's such a, for most people, it's such an inconvenient part of existence that that people actually block out the fact that homeless people even exist, you know? And I bet that a lot of us, I know that I actually have a lot of friends or even loved ones that themselves at one point at least in their life they've been homeless themselves, and they have family members that have also been homeless at some point, you know? So homelessness is sort of closer to our lives than we believe. It's a much bigger problem that affects all of us than we think about in our daily lives. And homelessness is not just this simple thing that comes from mm, that it's not a thing that happens for everybody for the same reasons. You could say that it's an interdisciplinary phenomenon. It's a multidisciplinary phenomenon. Like homeless people come from different walks of life. They face different problems. Different life circumstances have caused them to lose a permanent housing, and oftentimes um, there are structural and systemic forces at play that cause people to become homeless. Things like addiction can cause people to be homeless. Things like unstable work situation can cause people to be homeless. Losing your livelihood, losing a way to sustain a household. Mental health problems can cause people to be homeless. Like the list goes on. And as a very smart person whose doctorate thesis I am reading right now on the subject said, our goal on a systemic level is not just to help homeless people to quote unquote survive in their homelessness. That is not the goal. The real goal is to put before them structures that would allow them to get housing, address the issues, address the reasons why they became homeless in the first place. So, for example, when it comes to people with untreated mental disorders, to offer them access to therapy, to medication, and how a form of housing. And of course, you also need to help them find a stable job in order to be able to sustain themselves. These are very important things. What we don't want to happen is for, and we're going to go with the US example here. What we don't want to happen is to try to solve the issue through broad criminalization of the existence of the homeless. And the GOP in the US, the grand old party, is trying to do just that. It's trying to basically turn being a homeless citizen into a crime. And now we will take a brief look, because in its infinite wisdom, in one of the US states, the GOP has introduced a new bill which would decriminalize using lethal force against the homeless in the, I believe, Stand Your Ground law. We're going to take a look at that, and then we're going to take a look at something else, and then we're going to build then we're going to this sort of bring it all together and create a little bit of a picture of how the homeless are being criminalized for basically just existing and having found themselves in a really, really difficult life situation. I have here an article on this prepared. It's Kentucky. I'm gonna spoil it right now. It's Kentucky. I'm gonna spoil it. It's Kentucky. Cool. Lethal force. Darn. Yep. Lethal force against the homeless population. So, we're gonna take a look at the article now. Kentucky GOP's new bill decriminalizes use of deadly force against the unhoused. I'm just ashamed that this bill even came into fruition, a Lexington Council member said. Republican lawmakers in Kentucky introduced a bill last Tuesday that would criminalize homeless encampments and expand the state's stand your ground law to allow property owners to confront unhoused people with a gun. You know, because when your life goes to crap, when you lose everything, you don't even have a permanent shelter to live in, the best thing for you to happen in your life is for people to confront you, quote unquote, with a gun. The bill dubbed the Safer Kentucky Act, because we all know that the biggest threat to people are homeless residents. We all know that, of course. You know, basically some of the most disadvantaged people in society, the most looked down upon citizens, the most dehumanized citizens in society. Oh, yeah, they need to be confronted with a gun. Already has received more than 45 Republican co sponsors, and the Kentucky State Fraternal Order of Police has committed to testify in support of the legislation when it has a committee hearing. I'm just ashamed that this bill even came into fruition, and I'm asking people to call their legislators and say no. Lexington Council member Taina Fogel of District 1 said. The proposed legislation grants cities the authority to designate specific areas for unhoused individuals. If individuals are found outside of the designated area, residing in a tent, hut, temporary shelter, or vehicle with the intention to sleep, they may face misdemeanor charges leading to a fine of $5,000 and a potential imprisonment of up to 90 days. And here's the kicker. Most homeless people do not have the money to pay fines, especially $5,000 fines, which means that it's basically guaranteed that they will go to jail, which means that in Kentucky, sleeping in your own car can either land you a fine of $5,000, up to $5,000, or in jail for sleeping in your car. This is incredible. And this is a blatant way to criminalize the existence of the homeless. Notice this. The homeless are being basically isolated to ghettos. Well, let's call it what it is. They're being isolated legally in ghettos, and if they leave those ghettos, they face a fine or prison. So at that point, I have to ask, are they really equal citizens at that point? Aren't they being stripped of citizen rights based on their status? That is what's happening here. People are becoming less of citizens because of their financial status, because of their housing status. Telling someone that they cannot sleep in their car or in an encampment does not end homelessness, which is the most obvious statement of the year. Certainly, taking money away from evidence based successful housing programs does not end homelessness. Catherine McGinney, Director of Communications for a Louisville based advocacy group, Coalition for the Homeless, said. But this site is called throughout.org. The point of those legislations is not really to solve homelessness, okay? The point of these legislations is never has been and never will be to end homelessness. No, it is to end the existence of homeless people on the street. It is to remove an undesirable group from the street and present a squeaky clean image of a city. That is the purpose. It is to get rid of those who, due to their financial situation, do not deserve to live in the same city as others. They do not deserve to exist. The bill also gives people the ability to justify use of defensive force upon an unhoused person in instances of criminal trespass, including unlawful camping on the owner's property. This would allow property owners to use deadly force against unhoused people on their property without facing criminal consequences. Which, if this does not sound horrible, I don't know what does, quite frankly. We're very opposed to the institution and the justification. Sorry, I'm going to read this again. We're very opposed to the insinuation and the justification of a use of force against someone who is unsheltered or unhoused. We know that in those situations, de escalating and getting that person help are what we should do. But here's the thing, getting the person help, that requires work and serious systemic changes. Just getting rid of the homeless does not. That is the thing. The proposed legislation also includes a range of additional criminal charges, such as the introduction of a three-strike law targeting repeat violent felony offenders. It also proposes heightened penalties for fentanyl distribution leading to an overdose. classifies fleeing from law enforcement as a Class C felony and authorizes the death penalty in cases involving the murder of a first responder. These increased criminal charges will inevitably result in additional incarcerations in overcrowded prisons. A 2021 analysis by the Prison Policy Initiative found that if Kentucky were a country, it would have the seventh highest incarceration rate in the world as a result of criminal policy decisions. Moreover, a study by the Vera Institute of Justice found that Kentucky's jail and prison rates more than tripled from 1985 to 2018. Because of the state's dependence on criminalization as a means to address issues such as poverty, homelessness, and addiction. In 2022, the state's heightened focus on criminalizing social issues resulted in overcrowding in Kentucky jails. By the end of April, there were over 21,000 individuals in jails, and an additional 9,835 people were incarcerated in state prisons. It's easier to campaign on being tough on people. Let's clean up our streets and lock these people up. Whitney Westerfield, the Republican chair of the Kentucky Senate Judiciary Committee, said in September, "It is far more difficult to do the hard work of recovery, of building people back up." On Tuesday, various advocacy groups, including the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy, the Coalition for the Homeless, the Louisville Urban League, the Kentucky Equal Justice Center, Kentucky Council of Churches, and others held a press conference condemning the bill. We cannot continue to incarcerate everyone. It is a purely remote emotional response, Felicia Newman, the director of policy for the Louisville Urban League, said. "We should only incarcerate people for long periods of time when we are terrified of the violent acts they might commit. Not because we are angry that they're making our lives inconvenient and have a mental health problem like addiction." Right? Louisville. Louisville or Louisville sounds so much better. Leave me alone. Louisville sounds so much better. So there we go. That's the article. Okay? And that is just one aspect that we're sort of discussing here today. But there are a lot of big aspects when it comes to the criminalization of homeless citizens. Today, we have opened the gates of discussing homelessness on this channel. And there are two other big topics when it comes to this that I've been looking into. that I will shortly describe here now, and we will talk about in detail next time. One of them is the access or lack of thereof to public government run bathrooms for homeless individuals. In many states in the US, there exists a very peculiar paradox. A paradox, which I will soon argue, is by design. The paradox is as follows. The city does not provide enough publicly run by the government bathrooms in order to accommodate bodily needs of its homeless population. And on the other hand, it criminalizes public urination and defecation, which in practice means that since the homeless do not have any way to relieve themselves, which is a very basic bodily function, they are forced into a situation in which they have to relieve themselves in public, which opens them up to fines, which they usually cannot pay, which opens them up to then jail, sometimes up to 6 months in jail for urinating or defecating in public. So this is a big problem because, as I've said, this seeming paradox is a paradox by design. The policymakers don't want the homeless on the streets. They don't want the homeless in their clean, nice, reputable cities. So they will first create the conditions in which the homeless will be forced to commit a crime, and then the government will step in to punish the homeless for said crime. Are businesses allowed to deny someone access to water or toilet use? Yes. Private businesses are very much allowed to deny people access to their toilets. Think about it. Many restaurants limit the use of their toilets only to customers. If you're not a customer of the restaurant, you cannot use their toilet. So that is a very clear-cut classic example of a private business restricting who may or may not use their facilities. When it comes, yes, libraries count as public bathrooms run by the government, yes. It seems wrong that there are shelters for only specific demographics, but I'm open to hearing counter-arguments. I would like to say, and this is also a thing that we will they do sometimes. That's not exactly true. Fast food restaurants can limit them because, and I know this because I've been to fast food restaurants. Fast food restaurants in Poland, KFC does limit. You have to be a customer. You have to have a receipt from your food. That receipt has a code. You enter the code and you can enter the toilet as a customer. That's one way. Or some fast food places that I've been to gatekeep the toilets behind a fee that you have to pay in order to enter. That's also a form of making the place less accessible to the homeless. Like I would have to see, check. I'm not I'm skeptical if fast food places welcome homeless people into their facilities. You know? I'm not so sure if fast food restaurants are homeless friendly. You know? So okay, so the toilets are government run public toilets are one aspect which we will talk about. The other is unfriendly architecture, which is also a whole topic that we will be discussing. Okay. Public libraries are essential, basic safety net and social network in the US. Interesting. And apparently fast food joints. So I would assume that it depends on the fast food. I'm not sure if this is like a policy shared in all fast foods across the board. I'm not super sure. In Hungary, McDonald's also gatekeeps, but in the UK, I see many good McDonald's open to homeless. So I guess it really depends on the fast food place locally. Okay. I guess that's good. That's good. Hello. So that's one. We will be getting into this topic more in detail on next stream. Today we sort of focused on that bill. Next we have the infrastructure, the hostile infrastructure, things ranging from spikes on certain things that people could lie down on instead of lying on the ground, making benches compartmentalized again so that a homeless person cannot lay down and rest, making bus stop benches that you actually cannot sit down on, but you can sort of just lean on. I've seen such inventions as well. Yeah, Europe is not very good on this. But the US is not great on this either. You know? The US is not great on that either. From the big report that I've been reading on the subject today, there just isn't, even if the fast food joints chime in, there isn't enough toilets to facilitate the needs of the homeless population. There isn't. Fast food restaurants are not centrally organized. It's more like a local companies renting out the name and have to meet the standards. Yeah, it's basically a franchise. That's most of these restaurants are franchised. You buy the sort of you rent out the brand, you start your own thing with that brand, and you have to make it up to the standard of the brand, and then you can just then you're part of the franchise, and then you basically decide on your little fast food restaurant. And yes, shelters are also not a solution to the toilet problem. But we'll talk about it next time, okay? It's a homelessness is a pretty big topic, and I believe it requires a lot more than just one segment. I'm actually pretty happy with this one. If you are happy with this segment about homelessness, then I'm hoping you will leave us a like in um, and subscribe, hit the bell, all that good stuff that allows us to function. All right.